the scholars then saw Ahmed al-Hassan as a even greater threat, and so they began to issue fatwas that he be killed, that he was a false claimant, that he was a Dajjal, an Antichrist. They even bombed his house just moments after he managed to escape from there, because the 12th Imam told him to leave the house or the residence, and once he did so, they ended up bombing the place, and they were hunting him down. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام المهديين وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear sister Tiffany.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Inshallah, you're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm doing great today. Thank you so much for having me.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for being here. Yeah, so today we want to talk about one of the signs, one of the most important signs actually, of the emergence of the Mahdi, and that is the sign of the Yamani. So we have these signs that, bid'ah could happen in them. Okay, so the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, they spoke a lot about things that were to happen in the future, signs that were to happen before the coming of the Mahdi, events that would take place during the life of the Mahdi or during the life of the Qa'im, things that would happen to the nation of Islam after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or in the future, if it was the Imams that were speaking about it or narrating it. And all of these signs are subject to change. The actions of the people could change the event taking place, right?
Yes.
So there is a potential for change depending on the actions of the people, but the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam would mention that this and this and this is going to happen because it is the most likely probability based on what is taking place right now on the ground. Okay. However, there are these signs which the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam said were inevitable, unchangeable. Okay? No bid'ah could run in them. And bid'ah means a change can happen, like in the plan of God or in the events that take place, the course. One thing was decreed and it can be changed into another thing.
Yes.
Yeah? Just like in the very beginning when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi started with Islam, it was the decree of God that he worshiped with his followers towards Jerusalem. And then afterwards it changed and he began to worship, towards Kaaba, or turn his face towards Kaaba. The same thing happens. Or when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, went out with his companions and he was leading them into the battle of Uhud. So the battle of Badr, he won it. The battle of Uhud, the Prophet went out with his companions. He obviously led them into the battle to win, not to lose. And it was because of their actions and their shortcomings and their abandoning of the plan and disobedience to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that caused the event to change, and the victory became a victory for the disbelievers instead of a victory for the believers.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a change in the plan of God.
Yeah.
God had intended, willed, wanted for the Muslims to be victorious in Uhud, but because their actions, it changes.
Yes. It happened numerous times throughout the Old Testament and even the New Testament as well.
Exactly. So God intends one thing and then it changes, right? And we have the example, since you mentioned the Old Testament, of the Israelites and, how Moses, he left them and he was supposed to leave them for 30 days in the Quran, and then God makes an additional 10 days. So then they didn't think that he was coming back. It became 40. So that's a change. It was also a change when the Israelites were supposed to just cross over into the promised land, and then it changes and they end up, having to wander in the desert for 40 years, right?
Yes, exactly.
That was a change, and that was a bid'ah. Okay, so now that we've established that bid'ah is possible, There are things that are inevitable, that must happen. The Ahl Bayt alayhim salam mentioned them. One of them is the appearance of the Sufyani. The Sufyani became an inevitable sign, and that must happen, that will happen. There was a 100% chance that no matter what the choices of the Muslims are throughout from the time of the Prophet Muhammad all the way until the time of the emergence of the Qa'im, no matter what choices they made, this Sufyani character has to emerge. And that's because of the immense hatred that was in the hearts of the family of Abu Sufyan, whether it was Abu Sufyan or if it was Muawiyah, his son, or if it was Yazid, his son after that. This family, this cursed tree, they had so much hatred towards the Prophet Muhammad and his family that there had to be an enemy that would emerge from their loins in the future that would fight against the Qa'im or the Mahdi. Yeah?
Yeah.
One of the other signs is the appearance of a hand in the sky. Right? This is one of those inevitable signs. Another one of the signs which were inevitable, that no bidah can happen to change this, is the appearance of a character that's called the Yamani.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's important that we understand the difference here. The sign is the sign of the Yamani. The character is called the Yamani and not the Yamani. It's difference.
Yes.
Okay. Yamani means somebody from Yemen. Yamani means somebody who's a right hand. Okay? And this character is like a right hand to Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Okay. And when we look at the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam to see what it is that they say about this individual, they say that he is the companion of a truthful banner. They also say that if the Yamani emerges, then it is upon every Muslim to give him victory and to join him. It says that in the time of the Yamani, selling weapons is forbidden. It also says that the Yamani, whoever goes against him, is from the people of hellfire. Okay? And so we can understand from this narration, right, that the Yamani, and from the words of the Ahl Bayt, that the Yamani, it is an obligation to support him, and anybody who doesn't support him goes to hellfire, right? Yeah. And this does not occur except with somebody who is infallible and somebody who is a messenger or a proof upon the people, because God would never make it an obligation to follow somebody unless he was the absolute truth.
Yes,
right?
Of course, yeah.
Because the narrations about the Yamani, it doesn't specifically say that he is an infallible imam. This is one of those secrets that ends up being decoded and in the time of his appearance. But it says it in a different way. And that different way is that Muslims have an obligation to support this Yamani, and that he has a banner, and his banner is a banner of truth, and anybody who goes against it is from the people of hellfire. And so you can tell through this description that the individual, the character of the Yamani, who's a forerunner, he comes before the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. We can tell from there that he is now an infallible character, somebody who it is an obligation to follow this individual, right? Yes. And we also have another narration which specifically states that before the Mahdi, there is a Yamani and there is an Egyptian, right? So now we know that there's two characters that appear, on the on the battleground or in the public realm before the public appearance to the masses of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, and one of them is this Yamani character, and this Yamani character is the same Yamani character that's being described in the other narration.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
who is this character that is an infallible individual and who appears before Imam al-Mahdi, and it's an obligation that we follow? Well, other narrations state that he emerges in the same time as two other characters. One of them is called the Khurasani, and another one is called the Sufyani, which we mentioned.
Yes.
And the Sufyani is the ultimate evil character, and the Khurasani, it is unclear in the narrations whether he is, what side he ends up landing on, but he's one of those characters that is neutral, that has his own agenda, it is not stated that we should support him or follow him, nor are there narrations that are outright condemning him, but he does appear as this leader whom is racing towards Iraq at the same time that these other two are there. So it says that these three, they emerge in the same time. Even the narrations say that it's so close to one another that it's like as if they're emerging in the same hour, actually. Yeah. Other narrations say that the army of the Sufyani and the army of the Yamani, that like they're both rushing towards Iraq at the same time. So now we see that this banner of truth is in confrontation with the ultimate evil and the enemy of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and that is the Sufyani and his army.
Okay.
So in 1999, we had some interesting things take place. In 1999, we had a couple characters appear. In 1999, it was the year that King Abdullah of Jordan was crowned, and he became the king of Jordan. And in 1999, the dawah, the invitation, the call of a man, also took place. It also became a public phenomenon in Iraq. And basically what happened in Iraq is that Saddam Hussein, Lanatullah alayhi, was, being a tyrant as usual. And he decided that he was going to write around that time period the Quran with his blood. And when he did so, there was a man who gave a prediction, gave a prophecy that this would spell the end of the rule of Saddam Hussein. And right shortly after that happened the American invasion of Iraq. His dawah starts in 1999. It starts in the Hawza. He enrolls in the Hawza, and he begins to speak to the students there, and he begins to propagate his message. He identifies himself as being the character of the Yamani that is mentioned in the narrations, that it is an obligation to follow. He identifies himself also as being a messenger of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. He claims to the students of the Hawza, and the Hawza is the religious institution that teaches Shia Islam in Iraq and trains all of the Shia ministers and clerics. He informs them that he has had a secret meeting with Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, that the Mahdi, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, appears to Ahmad al-Hassan in a dream. And he tells him that he needs to go to this particular place and meet him.
Yeah.
And this occurs not just one time, but several times. And finally, Ahmad al-Hassan gets up and he goes to that particular mausoleum, which he was instructed to go to in his dream. Lo and behold, he finds in the mausoleum the man whom he saw in the dream, whom identified himself as Imam al-Mahdi, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. Okay?
Wow.
So it's one of those Abraham type events that takes place with Ahmad al-Hassan, God instructing Abraham to go to Mount Moriah. Same thing is taking place here. You have a dream that God gives to Ahmad al-Hassan where he sees Imam al-Mahdi, and Imam al-Mahdi is telling him to go meet him somewhere, and then dream becomes reality. The dream becomes true. And Ahmed, whose real name is Ahmed, son of Ismail, his father's name is Ismail, obeys the dream. He believes in the dream. He goes, and indeed, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam is there. Imam al-Mahdi proceeds, according to the narration of Ahmed, son of Ismail, to awaken him to many facts. And he chooses and appoints Ahmed al-Hassan. His name is Ahmed, son of Ismail. His nickname, right, became Al-Hassan. So just like you have the 12 Imams, each and every one of them has like their name, their birth name. So Ja'far as-Sadiq, his birth name is Ja'far, son of Muhammad.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But each and every one of the Imams would receive from God or from the Imam before them a title. And so Ja'far was titled the Truthful One. So he became Ja'far as-Sadiq. Ahmed al-Hassan, Ahmed, son of Ismail, he receives the title Al-Hassan, and he becomes more well known as Ahmed al-Hassan.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Imam al-Mahdi appoints him as a deputy, and he informs him of many things, all right? And he reminds him of himself, and he disturbs him greatly with many truths and realities about the corruption that exists within the Shia institution and the corruption that exists around the world in general. And he educates him, okay, and enlightens him to his mission and, to what is going on. And this breaks the heart of Ahmed al-Hassan because he had before a lot of faith in the Shia institution, and he thought that they resembled the salt that could fix even, the most bland of foods or the most corrupt of foods. The Shia institution would solve that. But he said that he found that even the salt had become, corrupted or had gone bad.
Yes. Yeah.
And he gave several speeches, by the way, which people can find and they can listen to. One of them is To the Great One. Another speech of his is the sermon, of the meeting with Imam al-Mahdi. And you have another sermon which was directed at the students of the Hawza, and a fourth speech which was the speech of Hajj, right, or the speech of pilgrimage. And most of these you can find all of them actually on our YouTube channel and hopefully on our website, where people can watch it in its entirety, subtitled. And hear the voice of Ahmed al-Hassan and hear him speaking in his own, narrating his own story of his encounter with Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. The Imam also became enlightened to the fact that there are these 12 Mahdis. Ahmed al-Hassan alayhi salam, he says that before that point, he didn't know anything, and he never had thought that he would even work or be involved in the field of religion. He had actually, before this encounter, went to school and studied to be an engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was chosen by God. And it's not strange for the messengers of God or the infallibles before they are chosen or before their mission begins or before their baptism or before they're sent forward with the Holy Spirit to, have a different trade.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and you know that Jesus was a carpenter.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a tradesman and as such. So Ahmed al-Hassan, he becomes enlightened to the fact that there are actually 12 Mahdis. And Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam shows Ahmed al-Hassan the will that the Prophet Muhammad wrote on his deathbed. And he informs him and shows him in a clear way through the narrations how the Prophet Muhammad, when death approached him on Thursday, it was a Thursday, he gathered some of his companions and family members, and he wanted to write a will. He was forbidden from writing the will. He was accused by one of the people present, which is identified in the narrations as Umar ibn Khattab. He was forbidden from writing down that which he wanted to write down.
Yeah.
And Imam al-Mahdi showed Ahmed al-Hasan how the will is a protection against misguidance, because the Prophet says, bring me a paper and pen so I can write you something that if you hold on to it, you will never go astray. So this is a divine promise that is safeguarded, that whatever it is that the Prophet writes in that paper, whoever abides by it, they will never go astray if they believe in the Prophet Muhammad, and the religion of Islam.
Okay, so it's fixed.
It's
It
fixed.
cannot change.
It cannot change. And then Imam al-Mahdi showed Ahmed al-Hasan how this will, even though the Prophet was prevented from writing it, on that Thursday, on the day of his passing, which was a few nights later, he ends up dictating it in a narration to Imam Ali. And it is the only narration out there in all of the books of the Muslims that states specifically what it was that the Prophet had intended to write. So there's one narration. It is an apparent narration that is in the books of the Muslims, and it's important that it's a narration that is in the books of the Muslims that show what is written, because the narrations state, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam stated that we don't have a single imam that comes from us except that he is infallible. Okay? And the infallible person does not come except that his name appears in a will, and he is not known by the apparent of his appearance. You cannot tell who is an infallible person, who the Yamani is that we have this obligation to follow. You cannot tell just by the way that they look. You can't tell who the Mahdi is just by looking for physical signs, because there's many people that you will find in them these physical signs. It's impossible to identify. And if an entire nation of Muslims are obliged to follow a particular person, they all can inspect his body. It's impossible. So there has to be another way to identify him, and that way to identify him, according to Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, is that their name is mentioned in a will. And we find here that the Prophet, on the day of his passing, he writes this will, and it's the only will that's out there, and it is the apparent will. And the Ahlul Bayt said that the companion of the matter would be known by the apparent will, a will that the people had always had between their hands.
Yes.
Yeah? And in that will, it states that, the names of all of these successors of the Prophet Muhammad, from Imam Ali, going all the way down to the 12th Imam, Imam al-Mahdi, who's now the speaker, who is speaking to Ahmed al-Hasan. And then it says in the will, and that when death approaches him, he should hand it over to the first of the close ones, or the first of the Mahdis in some narrations, and he has three names, and then it mentions Abdullah Ahmad al-Mahdi, right?
Yes.
And so Imam al-Mahdi tells Ahmed al-Hasan that this name Ahmad, who appears in the will, this is you. You are my successor. You are my messenger. You are the Ahmed that's mentioned in the will. When the people ask you for a proof that you met with me, right?
Yeah.
You remember when Moses met with God?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he says to him, okay, how am I going to convince these people?
Yeah. Who do I say sent me?
Who do I say sent me, right? And God enforces him. He enforces him with miracles. He enforces him with telling him, what to tell the people that his name is, etc. Mm-hmm. And Moses identifies himself also to the Israelites as being this promised Savior that was foretold by Joseph that they had been awaiting for. They were looking and praying for this character's appearance.
Yes. So same thing.
Same thing here. Ahmed al-Hassan, he goes forward and Imam al-Mahdi tells him that this is what you do. You tell the Shia, the true believers who held on to the will and believed in the promise of the Prophet Muhammad, that whoever holds on to this would never go astray. Inform them that you are the companion of the will. Your name is mentioned in the will. This is your letter of appointment by the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. Tell him that you are Ahmad. Tell him that the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam said that nobody can claim this matter and not be the companion of this matter except that God will cut off their age. Go forward and proclaim yourself as Ahmad in the same way that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi, he proclaimed himself and said that he was mentioned on the tongue of Jesus, and he is the prophet that they found written in the Torah and in the Gospels, right?
Yes.
So the people from before, they mentioned Muhammad's name in their wills and in their prophecies in the same manner. You, Ahmed Hassan, go forward and proclaim yourself that you are mentioned by name, Ahmed, in the will of the Prophet Muhammad. And he also informed him that he is the first of the 12 Mahdis, whom are to follow Imam al-Mahdi, and that he is to tell people also that, it's an obligation to follow him and to take the Pledge of Allegiance from the people and to call them towards the supremacy of God. The main case that Ahmed al-Hassan was sent forward with is this case of the supremacy of God.
Yeah.
And so Ahmed al-Hassan does exactly that. And he tells everybody that, look, you have all gone astray. And what they're teaching you in the Hausa is corrupt. And the main reason why it is corrupt is because these clerics have abandoned the idea that God is the one whom appoints the ruler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the only one who said such things, in the environment that he was in Iraq, amongst all these scholars who are calling people to follow themselves, who are calling people to imitate them, in this environment of people, wanting democracy, supporting the Americans and bringing democracy to Iraq. He was the only one who was saying such things, that God is the only one who chooses the ruler. And if you go back and you look at the story of religion, that's the key that was missing for such a long time, that had been lost. That is how God operates. He alone chooses the ruler.
Exactly. And so what do we have now? We have his prophecy came true. The Americans came in, as you mentioned. They toppled Saddam Hussein. And Ahmed Hassan raises this banner that's a white banner that says in the middle of it in green writing, Al-Bay'a Lillah, or supremacy is to God. And as all of the clerics on the earth, right, whether they lived in the east of the lands or the west of the lands, and now in the very home of Shia Islam, right, in the capital of the divine just state, Iraq, in the home of Ali ibn Abi Talib, in the lands that the blood of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was spilled because of this idea that we have to reject the leader who's appointed, by his own self or by means of the people, leaders such as Yazid, Lanatullah alayh, and that we should only follow the appointed person who's mentioned in the will, who is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and the imams that are appointed from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, in the very place, the birthplace, and the death place of so many members of the Ahlul Bayt and imams from the family of Muhammad alayhi salam. the Shia clerics began to call towards democracy and call towards the supremacy of the people and call towards elections. And Ahmed Hassan, he came forward saying, no, Imam al-Mahdi is saying that this is heresy. This voting in the elections, basically it is a reneging on the oath that you're supposed to give and your pledge that you're supposed to give to the Imam of the time.